Good morning, everybody. Welcome into this week's long form episode on Mining Stock Daily. And thank you for your patience this week as we were traveling to Las Vegas at the Fast Markets Lithium Conference. There's some great content coming down here on Mining Stock Daily and on Chris Berry's Power Current podcast that we do air on the Clear Commodity Network. There's a great 24 hours in Vegas, actually. Quick trip, but we got a lot of great interviews for that, and that'll be coming down the pipeline as well. I do encourage you to check that podcast out, The Power Current. As I said, hit that subscribe as well. But today on Mining Stock Daily, we have a 2-segment episode for you once again. Welcoming back Jared Dillian. He's got a new book out. Can you believe another book? I swear that guy puts one out every 6 months. And there's a lot happening in markets in general, too, that we're going to dive into with Jared as well. Then in the second part of this conversation, we're going to reach back out to our friend Doug Ramshaw of Minera Alamos. There was some news coming out of the Claudia Sheinbaum administration here earlier this week regarding mining. The market reacted. It wasn't great. And so we're going to get some clarification with Doug with some of those comments made from that government. Special thank you to Equinox Gold, Integra Resources, Vizsla Silver, and Revival Gold for their continued support of Mining Stock Daily. And as always, hit that like and subscribe button when you can. Share it with like-minded people. All right, everybody, here's the long form. Next week, another short week with holidays in Canada and in the U.S., so do celebrate safely, everyone. We'll do a couple days here in studio when the markets are open. All right, but here's my conversation with the one and only Jared Dillian, the Daily Dirtnap. All right, let's jump into it. All right, my friend, Jared Dillian. It's good to see you. We haven't connected since your conference weeks and weeks ago, so it's good to have you back.
Yeah, good to be back.
Yeah, it was a great event, by the way. I really enjoyed it.
Wait till next year. Next year, it's going to be insane. So
you're moving it?
Yes, moving it to Nashville.
Yeah. That's exciting. In fact, speaking of Nashville, I'm going to see you in a couple of weeks in Nashville, and we'll talk about that maybe later in the podcast. It's not necessarily important for this conversation, but what is important, Jared, I swear to God that you publish a new book every 3 or 4 months. I feel like we were just talking about a new book last week, but you've published a new one. It's called Rule 62, Meditations on Success and Spirituality. You got a hard copy right there. I have not read this. I haven't gotten my copy. I haven't had my sign. I'm going to wait until. Do I get a signed copy in a couple of weeks? Is that?
Yeah.
Is that in the card? Cool. All right, let's wait for that. But it's interesting. I mean, you always publish something different than what the last books were. This one, the provocative light, answering some of the deepest questions humans have asked. What does it mean to live a full life full of meaning? How does love really work? What is genuine wealth? How do you avoid regrets? And did the U.S. actually dismantle Iran's nuclear capabilities? Is that in the book?
No, that's not in the book.
That's the question to be asking today.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll talk more about that. But talk to us about Rule 62 and. What did you want to accomplish in this book? What was your inspiration? What were you getting off your chest here?
Well, this is an essay collection, and this is my second essay collection. And, I was writing these, and there was a theme developing, and it was like like the title implies, it's about success and spirituality. And, when I'm 51 now. When I was 31 in 2005. I had an important job. I was running ETFs at Lehman Brothers. I think on the outside, I seemed to be a pretty successful guy, but on the inside, I was a mess. I was spiritually disturbed. I was mentally a wreck. I had severe anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder. I was a complete disaster. And over the last 20 years, I put a lot of thought and a lot of effort into how to get more psychologically healthy and spiritually healthy. And it's taken a lot of work. It's not something you just think about. You actually have to work at it. So this book, Rule 62, is sort of, the collection of wisdom that I acquired along the way in my quest to get spiritually healthy, you know. And there's a lot of good advice in here. So there's 79 essays in here. It's 350-ish pages, and it's I mean my writing style for nonfiction, when I write nonfiction, I have very good first person voice, and it really flows. It's entertaining. There's a lot of humor. And I think some people might look at the cover and have some preconceived notions about it. I don't want to read this squishy book about like spirituality, but it's super entertaining, and you'll fly through it, even though it's kind of a long book. So
Yeah. I mean, I think you do a really nice job throughout any of the content that you publish, whether it's your books or your newsletter, or the interviews and the podcasts that you do, Jared, that you are very much an open book. Like, you are not ashamed to like share your vulnerabilities. But
Yep.
it sounds like, and maybe I'll find out through reading this book when I do, that maybe that wasn't always the case. And so what kind of happened, between 2005 and now, where you kind of, dropped I don't want to call it a facade, but maybe dropped the boxing gloves and just presented the world with who you are as an individual, the good and the bad.
Yeah, I think I really did that when I published Street Freak in 2011. Which I
Mm.
wrote mostly in 2009 and 2010. And I was when that book was coming out. I mean, that is a very personal book, about my struggle with bipolar disorder, and mental illness, and I put it all out there in that book. And I remember in the weeks leading up to the book launch, I'm like, what have I done? Like, this is a huge mistake. But,
Mm-hmm.
it's funny, like, that radical transparency is actually a good thing. And the other thing is that, um, like, since I'm an open book and since I put it all out there, like, I don't have any secrets, you know? Like, nobody's got anything on me. Like, I've already, like, all my warts and all my flaws are out there for people to see, and I just don't care. And there's a certain like anti-fragility about that, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I commend you for doing this, because we're in this time here, Jared, where obviously like men's health has become a big area of topic. I mean, I don't know what your social media, Instagram algorithms are like, but I get fed a lot of like men's health content, not only like physical health and strength and conditioning, but like mental health, right? And that's obviously become very important where, growing up, my parents' generation, that's not something we really brought up. It's something you kind of kept close and you didn't share. But at least our generation now, or at least I could say my generation, you're a little bit older than me, it is something that we want to consider and think about and really tackle the moment we are feeling vulnerable with in that realm. So maybe this, was it hard, back in those days to like come out with this, and what kind of help did you get? What did you do? And, obviously I want people to read the book, but like, how did you kind of tackle this in a time where it wasn't something very popular to do?
yeah, I mean, back in 2005, which isn't all that long ago, it's 20 years ago, there was still a big stigma about mental illness, you
Oh
know.
yeah. Yeah.
And I remember, I was hospitalized while I was at Lehman, and, there was only a few people at the firm who knew, including my managers, and they kept it a complete secret. Like, I was missing off the trading floor for like 3.5 weeks, and they successfully kept it a secret as to why I was gone, because there was that stigma, and that is, I want to say it's totally gone, but I would say it's mostly gone over the years. Like, people are much more open talking about this stuff now. I would say more women than men, but even men talk about it now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it is important, obviously, I'm sticking up for us guys, we carry a lot of weight, and it's quite frankly, sometimes you kind of see it in like TV shows and stuff when it talks about financiers and Wall Street. But I've never lived that life. I've never been a part of it. But I mean, I could seriously understand that maybe there's a lot of baggage and a lot of weight that those individuals carry, both men and women carry in those jobs and those responsibilities, and even when you're young and eager and want to be successful, maybe that weight is a little bit heavier than most. I mean, is that something does that kind of plague Wall Street to this day?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was fortunate that I was working in a place where Lehman was a family. Like it really was. Like people took care of each other. I think if I were working at a bigger bank that was a little bit more impersonal and those kind of relationships didn't exist, like I probably would have got let go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, job well done on this book. I really look forward to getting my signed copy in a couple of weeks. Rule 62 Meditations on Success and Spirituality. And that is available online on Amazon. I think, is there another place you can get it online that you mentioned in your newsletter?
Amazon is the best.
Amazon's best. Okay, there you go. And I'll leave a link of the Amazon window in the show notes as well. Jared, let's talk about markets here. I got a number of bullet point items. It's Thursday afternoon here this week. Equities throughout the board making new all-time highs. There's a lot of speculation, a lot of very smart people that feel like this thing's way overbought, that they're not necessarily seeing how it could go higher, but it continues to defy the odds. Equities all-time high. You can now buy a house using fart coin. That's cool. Trump continues to call Jerome Powell names. Like there's a lot of things going on, but it seems like one of those things. If you're following more of the mess that's in the headlines, you might be missing some real serious opportunities here in this market. But I mean, with these all-time highs, like, is this at all surprising to you?
It's complicated. Like, first of all, I wouldn't short this market. The price action is very grindy. We're just grinding higher. It's a very low volatility sort of move. This is not the price action you want to short. I have no desire to be short this market. I had a small short on this morning. I took it off and I just, I'm done. I think that there's sort of this meme that developed around the whole Iran situation, and basically people said nothing ever happens, right? Like fade geopolitical risk. Like if there's a bomb or some conflict somewhere in the world and markets freak out, buy stocks, sell oil, sell gold. It's all going to work out. Nothing ever happens, right? And I think that's true to a certain extent. There's a guy on Twitter named Eddie Elfenbein who actually tweeted the other day that the biggest down day in the stock market from 1937 to 1962 was actually when North Korea invaded South Korea. And I don't know what year that was. I think it was the early 50s. And that was the biggest down day in a 25-year period. So it's not always the case that nothing ever happens, right? Things happen. And as my trading style is I like to be exposed to that kind of volatility. Like if there's something going on somewhere in the world, I want to be exposed to it and I want to make money off of it. So this environment that we're in where nothing ever happens, quote unquote, and the market is grinding higher is really the worst possible environment for me.
But I mean, if it's just grinding higher, I mean, why not just go along until the music stops?
Yeah, there's a very good argument for that. I mean, if your style of trading isn't working, why not do another style, right? And it's not that simple. Like I disagree with it philosophically. Like I could buy some S&Ps and make 30 or 50 basis points a day, and I could do that for a while. And then at some point, there's a stupid example, but a nuclear bomb, right? And the market's down 10%, and I can't get out, right? So I volatility is good for trading. I thrive in periods of volatility, and this is no good. Now, on the other hand, the portfolio in my newsletter, the portfolio in the Daily Dirtnap is doing very well, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's
Mm-hmm.
really there's only like one short in that portfolio, and it's Blackstone. Everything else is long. It's basically a long only portfolio, and it goes up every day. So I don't, you know, there's one side of my business that is doing well, and there's another side that's not. So
Yeah. Well, and I gotta commend you. I haven't take all of the positions that you have in your Dirtnap portfolio, but I have taken quite a few, and I will agree they're doing great. Specifically, the move into emerging markets in South America. I mean, a
yep.
lot of those ETFs are doing so well, just quietly up, 0.5%, 1.5% a day. There might be, one down week, but it's nothing, anything that's just, natural little correction. But this move in emerging markets, and nobody's really talking about it. Like this thing has a long way to go. I completely agree with you when you wrote about it. I think it was just confirmation for me to go along that.
Yeah, yeah.
No, no. Anything you're seeing? I mean, Brazil's still kind of like everybody still likes Brazil, like to invest in Brazil, but that ETF is still kind of stuck in the mud. What needs to happen to get that going?
That's a very long-term trade. Like, there was, people kind of, it broke a downtrend, and a lot of people rushed into it. The ETF got some inflows. Um, Basically, you're getting paid an 8% dividend to wait until the election, right? And it's not a foregone conclusion that Lula's going to lose or his party is going to lose. Like, Brazilian elections are very unpredictable. So, but at the moment, it seems as that the Workers' Party is going to lose next year. And Brazil is one of the cheapest markets in the world. It trades at 6 times. You're looking at double-digit dividend yields. Like, if they can get out of their own way politically, like it's really probably the single most attractive opportunity in the world. So,
Yeah, yeah. Colombia keeps doing well. Chile keeps doing well. On the other side of the pond, Vietnam looks pretty good as well. So, just some of those ideas that were shared in the Dirt Nap, and also within the conference, again, was a little bit more confirmation bias for me. So, I was happy to hear it. Um, can we talk about the quote unquote volatility the last 2 weeks out of the Middle East, and not necessarily volatility. I mean, the VIX hardly did anything. I mean, even when U.S. bombed Iran on Saturday night. I mean, obviously it was Saturday, so markets couldn't necessarily react. But you're looking at a VIX that's still kind of suppressed, mid to low 20s. I mean, should this have been our sign that like literally markets don't care about what happens, or maybe they were calling a bluff here?
well, they cared about tariffs. We got the VIX
Yeah.
to 60 on tariffs, so they cared about tariffs, and they'll care about something else. I mean, the other thing to remember is that Trump is not a VIX 12 president. Trump is a high volatility president. And right now we're having discussions about replacing Powell, right? And maybe it's Warsh, maybe it's Kevin Hassett, maybe it's Judy Shelton, maybe it's Chris Waller, maybe it's somebody else that's really terrible. Like, but there's going to be some volatility around that. Like, I think with Trump as president, you can't be running around selling options and shorting vol, and like I just I think that's working right now, but I think it's not always going to work with him in charge. So
Yeah. What is happening behind it? There's so many things as far as the financialization of the government's playbook here, and I don't know who's going to be the next Fed chair. I don't think it's Judy Shelton's on maybe on the periphery, because she's more of a sound money person. You cannot convince me that Trump is a sound money type of guy.
no, no, I don't
He's
think
an
it's going to be
he's
her. Yeah.
Yeah, he's an easy money kind of guy. He's pushing for lower yields. Jerome Powell right now is literally fighting back on that, in fear that it would spike inflation again. He's got less than a year left on his tenure as Fed chair. Um, I feel like this is just kind of a story. This is going to be a back and forth where Trump's going to call him out on social media for a number of times, and Jerome's just going to kind of write it out until his tenure's over. So, I mean, I don't think Trump goes out and fires him. I don't think he can. Well, he couldn't. I mean, that'd be a shit show in the courts. So I
Yeah,
don't know.
there's if you remember at the conference, Chan Suran was talking about that Humphrey executor case
Yeah.
about firing the heads of independent agencies, and Humphrey executor hasn't been resolved yet. Um, if it is resolved in the government's favor, then it is possible that he could fire Powell. I mean, that could happen. So
And when do you what's the timeline on that? Do you know? I can't remember.
I don't know. No.
Okay. All right. We'd have to go back and look. But what's been interesting here out of, with the geopolitical news is obviously there was a huge move in equities. Gold and oil spiked on fears that this thing was really going to escalate, and that thing faded quickly. But this commodity market as a whole, Jared, is quite fascinating. We have metals up. I mean, gold's flat. Silver's doing pretty well, moving higher. Platinum, palladium, copper today, just absolutely raging. Ags are in the can, and oil's back down to mid-60s. So really, this commodity market, the only foundation really is the physical metals keeping this thing alive. I mean, is this and I know like our friend TG, he's really concerned about the gold price right now. He just doesn't really like the chart. Tony Greer, that is. How do we make this? How do you watch this commodities market? Is this something that continued to move higher, or is it having it on the back of just one segment of the entire complex is an iffy place to be?
Well, I think the ags are going to bottom soon. I think all the charts are looking like they're getting close to a bottom. Uh, Corn and wheat, specifically, and soybeans. I think those charts are going to bottom sometime soon. The metals. I mean, to talk about platinum. I mean, in the newsletter, I've been saying for a couple of weeks that platinum is cocoa. It's the same freaking trade. Like, you're talking about a breakout from a multi-decade downtrend, and it breaks out, and you've got some people, I won't name any names, saying that platinum is done, it's over. If you said that about cocoa, right, when that broke out, you would be carried out, right? When you're talking about breaking out from multi-decade downtrends, like, it's going to run for a long time. I think platinum's going to 2000 lickety split. I think it's getting there soon. So
Wow. Hey, but cocoa, there was a fundamental reason behind it before the speculators took control of it. I mean, there was, drought in Africa. Hey,
yeah, I mean, I think platinum just got to the point where it was so cheap relative to gold that you just couldn't ignore it anymore. Like, somebody sent me something today, an article about how jewelry manufacturers are starting to use platinum instead of gold, right?
yep,
Because it's just so
yep,
much cheaper. So eventually something gets cheap enough and people take notice and it starts to work. So
yeah, yeah. What about gold? And we talked about our friend Tony Greer. He doesn't like the chart movement here. I'm not necessarily as concerned. It keeps hugging its 50-day moving average and kind of just trading in a range here and just kind of waiting for the next move, up or down. But what are your thoughts on gold, other than you hate it?
yeah, I hate it. Gold sucks. So it looks like an ascending triangle to me with a triple top, but as you know, there's no such things as triple tops. So I watch it trade all day long, and I'm not a big fan of the price action. It kind of trades like ass. But that can change overnight. The one thing I'm worried about gold is that the volatility has been a little bit suppressed lately, and I'm worried that we could get $100 move one way or another very quickly. It could break
Yeah.
up or it could break down. That's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Yeah. Well, for us people that are been in gold for a while, $100 moves are you kind of expected.
Yeah.
And when it's obviously up, when it's up $100, we're knocking, pounding the fist on the table, we're saying we told you it was coming. When it's $100 down, we think the world's coming to an end, and then the miners trade even worse. It's like 2 times lower on their their percentage loss with the gold move down like that. It's hard to swallow. I know I was going to tell you, you were writing about your position in hymns the other day, and obviously that had a tough week. It was down 30% in a day.
Yep.
And I was like, "Oh, Jared, just dabble in some junior minors and you'll be used to this. Then you'd have another essay for your book to talk about trauma." It's quite interesting. The whole go. We'll see where it goes. I don't necessarily. I mean, I like the idea of it moving higher, obviously, but I don't necessarily see the catalyst that would have it scream down. I think there's just way too much volatility in this world, and I think the Fed will cut eventually, and I think gold's just kind of waiting for that confirmation, eh?
Yep.
Yeah. All right, my friend. Well, we've got a trip, you and I, heading to Nashville in a couple weeks. I will admit, I kind of rode your coattails on this, but I appreciate you being supportive of it.
Yep.
You got a book signing, an event, and then a DJ gig the evening of July 17th.
Which is sold out.
Man, I needed extra tickets. I'm gonna have to find a way. Sold out. Wow, that's crazy. Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be there. We're gonna be there in Nashville. I've never been to Nashville, but you have been going quite often. Like, you really like it.
Yeah, Nashville's a cool town. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's going on in Nashville that you just really enjoy?
I mean, I have some business there. I can't really get into it, but I have to go there for work. So, but also, like, I'm getting sick of going to New York. Like, I have to go to New York next week, and I'm really dreading it. I really don't want to get into the mayor's election. I don't want to get into that dog pile. But New York sucks. And also, I've done a whole bunch of DJ gigs in New York.
Yeah.
And like promoting a party in New York is absolutely hell, because people are so self-absorbed. Like, I've literally had people say, "Oh, I can't come to your party. I'm going to be 10 blocks north." Like, they won't walk 10 blocks to the party. Like, people are just so jammed up on their own bullshit. Like, they won't come out to a party. Like, it's just, so I'm done. I'm done with New York.
Yeah. You know what was surprising? So I was in Vegas for 2 nights this week, and I stayed at the Cosmo. You ever stayed at the Cosmo?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, it's lovely. I really like it. And I did notice, obviously it's always expensive when you go to Vegas, but this time I was like, man, things seem really expensive. I mean, the rooms were cheap, but everything else, the drinks, the food on the Strip, seemed very expensive. So I finally asked the bartender.
The last time I was there, I was in the MGM Grand, and I didn't feel like dinner, but I wanted to get a snack, so I got a bag of Doritos. Right now, it wasn't a small bag, it wasn't a huge bag, it was like a medium-sized bag. Medium-sized bag of Doritos. Guess how much?
Oh, probably like $12.
$15.
$15. $15. No, and I asked one of the bartenders, I said, like, what's traffic like? What's been going on? It's like pretty quiet. They're starting to cut down on schedules for servers. They now are having machines do a lot of the serving on the casino floor. So when the waitress takes your order, if you're playing cards, the waitress takes your order, she goes back. She now takes that order and plugs it into a machine, which serves the drink that she takes back to you. So they're cutting down on that capital. A bottle of Corona, Jared, is $12. Could you imagine like you, TG, and I having a night out on the town on the Strip, and it's your turn to buy the round, and all of a sudden 3 beers is $36?
Yeah.
It's insane. Yep. I mean, it just feels like they're pricing everybody out.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
And I mean, that's why it's quiet, right? I think people are starting to like
push back.
Push back a little bit. Anyways, that's my anecdotal story of the week. All right, man. Rule 62. Show us the book once again. out on Amazon. There'll be a link in the show notes. Congratulations once again. I'm sure
Thank
you
you.
already have the next one up your sleeve. What are you going to do next?
The next book is called The Awesome Portfolio. It's already written. It's coming out in next fall. So it'll be a little over a year.
Okay. A little over a year. What? Not in 6 weeks? All right. All right. I'll look forward to seeing you in Nashville. Have a great 4th of July and great couple weeks, and we'll see you then.
Yep. See you.
All right, everybody. Just take a quick break, and we will be back with more here on the long form of Mining Stock Daily. Stay tuned. All right, we are approaching our second segment here on this week's long form episode of Mining Stock Daily, and there was some news out earlier this week that actually, I think it was a little complicated, I guess you could say, coming out of Mexico, specifically with the mining sector there. There's some confusion, and I will admit I'm definitely one of them. With the confusion, I think it comes down with real definitions and some of the terminology being thrown out in some of these communications. But it was reported, S&P Global earlier in the week, that President Claudia Sheinbaum said that Mexico will not grant any new concessions. And there was a little bit of an article in there. I'm sure many people who are invested in Mexico have already read. And there was obviously selling taking place on many of the junior mining equities that have Mexican assets. One of them that maybe got sold off the most is our good friend Minera Alamos and President Doug Ramshaw. So I asked Doug to come back onto the podcast and provide some clarification and maybe even just answer some of my questions and confusions, because if I have questions, I can't be the only one. So we're welcoming Doug back on. So Doug, thanks so much for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure, Trevor. And yeah, it is much more nuanced, and it has always been much more nuanced than headlines actually suggest. So happy to come on and kind of talk state of play.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the immediate reaction appeared to be, this is new news. Like, this is set in stone, no new permits, no new projects coming online, unless you're a lithium play, c'est la vie. And then through conversation I had with you before we pressed record, he's like, slow your horses. This is not that. So kind of walk us through this.
Yeah, and it's not new news in that Claudia Sheinbaum said the exact same thing going back over a year ago. You know, and we can distill a lot of what she said down to a couple of things. And for those that have followed Mexico, there was a hoopla and energy in all these stocks in the third week of October when at point 87, magical 87 of a 100-point election plan disappeared from her 100-point plan. 87 did exist while she was running in the elections last year, and it basically said no granting of new mineral concessions for open pit mine development. Now, what she said this week was not different than that. And the key words there are, these are concessions. And in Canada, they'd be claims. And also very key was the word new. In Mexico, if you approach anything retroactively, it will open up all manner of constitutional lawsuits. The Constitution doesn't allow for retroactive actions in that regard. And that's what we saw actually with the 2023 mining reform. It was viewed, you know, largely unconstitutional, and about 600 amparos, which are these legal challenges, were filed, and they've been gradually going through the courts, and they've been upheld, because you can't treat stuff retroactively down there. The other thing she said on the campaign trail, which was reiterated this week, was that new projects, or projects I should say, not to confused with these new mineral concessions, would have to go through a rigorous, strict environmental review. And I have no problem with that. Every country in the world should require strict environmental reviews of any mineral project that's being developed. So that was reiterated this week. But again, not new. Something she said a year ago, something that has been out there for over a year. So it was very surprising, and maybe it got packaged as new news in some of the articles. So the reporting on stuff in Mexico, which makes it very hard for investors, is often not well reported or poorly headlined, but perfectly headlined for the clicks. And in that regard, it might be worth, with this whole terminology, mineral concessions. If she wanted to say no more permits for open pit, she could have said it. They have the word. Just like in point 87 last year, Trevor, she could have said no new permits for open pit mines, but it was no mineral concessions. And it's a very important distinction. And it actually goes back. I was hoping we'd pass the AMLO period, but it's worth going back to AMLO, because very early on in his term, he didn't like that previous administrations had, in his mind, opened up and given away in the form of mineral concessions huge tracts of Mexico for mineral exploration. So very early on, using exactly the same language as Claudia Sheinbaum used this week, he said his Morena party, and now Sheinbaum's Morena party, was not going to be issuing new mineral concessions. It's like, and in fact, the ones that are out there, he wanted to reduce the period from 50 years to 30 years of ownership. It's like, look, explore the land in Mexico we've already granted. And for companies like Minera and all these other companies down there that have mineral concessions in good standing, they often have 30 to 50-year terms. And if they're kept in good standing, there's not much that can be done about changing any of that. So he had years ago, 7+ years ago, had said the exact same thing: no new mineral concessions. Now, where it becomes problematic for investors is he also said things which got reported routinely, like his government's, a few years into his term, I think in 2021, he was saying his government's not awarded any mining permits, like using the correct terminology, but incorrectly, because that was not the case. Orla is the last open pit permit released, and I understand why there's trepidation in investor ranks, because it's been a long time. That was 2020 or 2020. But that was awarded by AMLO. Minera's first permit came from AMLO. Silvercrest, and those are both open pits. Silvercrest, an underground mine, got a permit from AMLO. Yet it was reported routinely that the AMLO government's not issued any permits. So this is the problem, and it's partly terminology, and I think, it's easy for anyone like invested in Canadian companies to think of mineral concessions in Mexico kind of like mineral claims in Canada. And when, so you get terminology differences, but you also get flat out incorrect data points out there, and investors have to make a determination on that. In the case of Minera this week, and I was extremely puzzled by the reaction, but it looked like it was one large seller early on and set the tone for the day. Anyone who interpreted the headlines one way was probably feeling, I was right, look, the stock sold off. There's another Silver Tiger that are looking to permit an open pit in Sonora. Their stock's green this week. Volume was up. But so companies with very similar profiles and needs, it highlights that you can have very different subsets of investors on your register. And one set can view things another way. And everyone's perfectly okay to have their interpretation of this stuff. But it was very surprising. I spent Tuesday puzzled, bemused, stressed only for my shareholders who should never expect to have a downdraft like that in a given day. And I'm glad it looks like the stock's recovering from it. But not stress myself. I've never felt better about the shares I own in the company. And not just because I think actually what needed to happen for some of these much awaited permits, and we're not first in line, but there are companies in front of us that need them, and then we get closer to first in line, was these statements out of the Mexico government, because I think that's the gating item. Claudia Sheinbaum wants to pay due respect to her Morena Party coalition, which is 13% Green Party. And so she needs to highlight, we are going to have strict environmental reviews on these projects. And I think now companies that have gone through those steps could easily see their paperwork coming. And that will be a wonderful thing for anyone invested in this space, because I think for too long, there's been this question mark. It's if there's going to be another mine, as opposed to as we start the paperwork flowing, it's, everyone's going to look at the companies are waiting, and it's going to feel more like a when, so long as obviously they're building mines in environmentally and non-sensitive areas and to a appropriate code and everything else. So it was a bit of a weird one, because to me it was not new news, but clearly for some people it felt like it, and maybe that's just Mexico PTSD that everyone has suffered, including myself. I had hair once.
I think it's part. I think it's just a little bit of impatience, and because of where we were with AMLO, there continues to be quite a bit of skepticism, right?
Yeah.
And so as much, I mean, just me as a shareholder of Monera, and obviously I have positions in other companies in Mexico. It is, we've as a junior mining investor, you see the walls crumbling down rather quickly in certain scenarios. And what you're trying to do is protect yourself from having that happen. Mm-hmm. And so when you have this skepticism coming out of one entire country and its mining complex, any sort of potentially harmful communication is going to just get exponential. And that's just where the sentiment is. But my own confusion, I expressed this to you, through communication before this, and you said it, is I'm just very confused. What is a concession? What's the definition of a concession? What's the definition of a permit? Are they one and the same? Are they completely different? And as you said, think more of a concession as a claim. I was like, okay, great. Does that mean explorers can't go file any more mineral rights claims for exploration in Mexico? Is that what she's saying?
Yeah, I actually think, and I think the 2023 reform was actually more impactful for companies wanting to go down there and explore. Right? This is kind of, and the point I made about what AMLO said very early on in his term. We've given up too much of Mexico for exploration. Surely there's stuff on the ground we've already given up that you guys go and find. Right? So yeah, it would be very similar to Canada saying, no more staking of claims. Whether that's done at the provincial level or federal level, it's been mostly provincial, I think. But no more claims. We got lots of claims in Canada. Go find stuff on those, right? But that's not the same as, oh, you found something. Well, you can't have a permit. But what we are going to treat your permit application for is on an individual basis and meeting strict environmental guidelines. And that would be no different than in Canada. Companies applying for permits, they go through a process, and it's on a case-by-case basis. The big positive that came out of this week, which something that many people like myself have been viewing for a long time, was the shadow ban, this de facto ban on permit paperwork moving, that there was going to be this broad, cross-the-board ban on new mines, was completely, ripped up in these statements. But rightly, like Canada or the US or Australia or Nigeria, a mine and its application will be treated on an individual basis, not some broad sweeping brushstroke that says, no, none of you can build mines. And there are mines that we shouldn't have built. I'm a big believer. In 1993 or 4, I wrote an article in the Mining Journal in London because they just brought in this 50-year mining ban, or for Antarctica. And I thought to myself, that's fantastic, because during my career, we can have one pristine part of the globe. There's certainly enough mineral potential elsewhere. And I thought that was good. And there are projects in, whether they be in the US or Canada or in Mexico, that are in environmentally sensitive areas that will have, locals that don't want them. And I don't think we need every mine built. It's certainly in the gold space. Maybe we need every copper mine in the world and every, but for gold, no, we don't need every mine. But, so treating things on an individual basis is important. And that was something else that Claudia Sheinbaum said on the campaign trail, that she did not want to stand in the way of projects that, yes, passed a strict environmental review, maybe stricter than past administrations, but that's a good thing. As miners, we should be looking at every possible way to safeguard the environment and support, not just through money, but the local communities we work in and the local stakeholders, which includes protecting the environment as best we can that we're going to operate in. And the other condition she really wanted to reinforce was projects that get approved need to have strong local support. So, we spent an extra year on our surface rights at Cerro de Oro because we wanted to permit for a larger operation there, and that involved working with an ejido. And that takes time because there's a series of back and forth and then a series of votes. And long story short, after that year, we had 100% support, 100% voter support at the local community that want the mine. And we've already got the local municipality on board. And Zacatecas is a state where mining is at 20% of their GDP. It was very interesting that 2 days before Claudia's comments, Ms. Sheinbaum's comments, I should say, I think on Sunday, the Minister of Economy, and mining falls under his purview, was giving a presentation and a speech in Zacatecas. But it wasn't just Zacatecas that was pro-mining and pro-mineral development. It wasn't just Zacatecas representatives there. There were Sonoran ones too. And both Sonora and Zacatecas, mining is over 20% of GDP at the state level. It's very important. So again, it seemed, I was thinking, oh, that's all very positive. We're finally seeing some movement here because I think things slowed down in Mexico this year when the trade war happened. It distracted. Now mining's back, and it doesn't have. It's actually a positive that is being talked about again and advancing, because I actually think that these very statements will serve as the one last gating item before some more permit paperwork could come. We saw a few things done in January, and shareholders are being frustrated because it's slowed down, and it has slowed down as a result of trade war that I know was a distraction for senior government officials down there. I know of companies that were about to have face-to-face meetings with the president down there. And I don't think she was having face-to-face meetings to tell them they couldn't build their mine. She wants to make, some high-profile announcements, and it's worth pointing out that how wild the reaction, at least for us, was this week. Because if you go back to January 13th, when the Mexican government unveiled their 2025 to 2030 National Development Plan, there were some very key points in there about mining. Mining was a strategic sector, designated a strategic sector. 2, the country states that are very big miners, like Sonora and Zacatecas, were going to get public funding to support infrastructure to support their mining industries. 3, that they were going to embark on an international roadshow to attract foreign investment into their mining industry. It's worth thinking about all of these things when you read some of these headlines this week, because it's in stark contrast to that. And in reality, my thought is you can save the air miles. You don't have to go on an international roadshow to attract money to the sector. You know what attracts money to the sector will be permits. And I think we will, as we see some permit news coming, we will see that, not just broadly in terms of the hundreds of millions of dollars of investment that can go into projects and that can support the federal government and the state government and the local communities, but you'll see it in stock performance as well. So it was a very wild, puzzling couple of days there in the market, and I didn't see anything that I hadn't read a year ago, that I hadn't seen her say a year ago. And I think that's why I was so puzzled. But clearly our subset of shareholders are different than a subset in another company. And I've seen other companies be green on the week facing these exact same headlines. And ours, we saw some people spooked by it. And as I say, I can only put it down to a kind of a Mexican PTSD. And I get it. I totally get it. And that's what makes a market. Some people are betting that this is a nothing burger in another company, and some people have taken the other side of the bet in Minera. Interestingly, of the 15, 16 million shares we traded this week, there were 15 or 16 million shares of buyers, albeit at lower levels, that were like, I'll take that bet. But anyway, I'm glad I lost my hair a while back, because if I had any remaining, it probably would have been on the floor by the end of Tuesday.
Listen, I wanted to have you on here because I wanted to ask you for the clarification. Obviously, the market response is the market response, and that is what it is. But I just really thought this needed a little bit of insight. And like I said before, if I'm confused, then I can't be the only one who's confused. Although, I'm not the brightest crayon in the box sometimes. But however, I'm not the only one that is really troubled by what was published. So I'm glad you came on, and obviously we will continue to talk more about what is happening with the assets in Mexico and in Arizona now as we continue. But that's not really the premise of this conversation. My last question, and if we just short answer, Doug, knowing that we have this on the plate, how do we as an industry working in Mexico maybe push for maybe some sincere consideration of the wording used in these communications? Can we not use the word concessions and just really call it claims?
It doesn't. It certainly how this stuff is passed and how it gets reported is incredibly confusing, and it doesn't have to be. And it has always been that way. And I've always said to people that it's much more nuanced than these headlines. But you're in the media business. There are headlines that are deliberately written a particular way to get clicks. There's reporting that is done by good journalists and others that don't fact check stuff and think about stuff and get some opinions that counter, and it makes it very hard for investors who, and I'm glad I could come on and hopefully provide some clarity here, because it's not the kind of thing that we didn't put a press release out in October last year when on a Friday afternoon we jumped 15%, reporting on something out of Mexico, and we're not going to do it this week. But, in many ways, I wish, companies were able to actually provide their version of a ChatGPT analysis of, media reports or whatever, but it's not typically a thing a company does. And hopefully this will serve as a useful bit of information for people, not just on the Minera side, but looking at Mexico in general, because I think we have seen sentiment shifting. And I think that's why a number of companies took it in its stride this week, because there has been a shift in Mexico sentiment for really since October last year. Anyway, that was about as short as an answer I could give.
No, that's very good. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate your time. Good to talk to you, and enjoy Canada Day next week.
Oh yeah, when's that?
So. Thanks.
No, seriously. It's like I don't even know what day of the week it is. Tuesday. Okay, I'll take one day of the market shut for sure right now.
There you go. That's a wrap here this week on Mining Stock Daily, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, day in, day out. And we will be back when the market reopens on Monday, and then it'll be kind of a shorter week with the holidays. Have a wonderful few days, and be well. Talk to you again soon.